Welcome. Take a deep breath, settle into your space, and let the tensions of the day begin to fade. Tonight, we journey together through the quiet corridors of history, where we'll encounter stories that shaped the world, stories of lives cut short, of fates that turned on moments both grand and small. History, you see, is not merely a collection of dates and battles. It is made of people who loved, who hoped, who suffered, and who faced their final moments in ways both expected and utterly unforeseen. Some met their end on grand stages, witnessed by thousands. Others slipped away in silence, their passing marked only by those closest to them. Tonight, we'll explore these endings not with sensationalism, but with quiet reverence. We'll walk through the circumstances that led to tragedy, understand the times that shaped these fates, and perhaps find in their stories a deeper appreciation for the fragile, precious nature of existence itself. Our journey will take us from the ordinary rhythms of medieval life, where death was an ever-present companion, to the dramatic falls of emperors and reformers, and finally to the mysterious circumstances that still puzzle historians today. We'll move slowly, deliberately, allowing each story to unfold in its own time. So close your eyes if you wish. Let your breathing slow. The past is waiting, patient and still, ready to share its whispers with you. Imagine yourself in a small village somewhere in the heart of France, in the year 1347. The seasons turn as they always have. The sun rises over thatched roofs, casting long shadows across narrow dirt pathways that wind between timber-framed houses. Smoke curls lazily from chimneys, carrying the scent of wood fires and whatever meager breakfast might be cooking, perhaps porridge, perhaps nothing at all. You are a villager here, one among perhaps 200 souls who make their lives from this land. Your existence follows rhythms set by the sun, the seasons, and the demands of your lord, whose manor house sits on the hill overlooking the village like a watchful parent. Death, in your world, is not an abstract concept discussed in hushed tones. It is your neighbor. It sits at your table. It walks alongside you in the fields. The infant mortality rate in your village is staggering by modern standards. Of every 5 children born, perhaps 2 or 3 will see their 5th birthday. You have known this reality intimately. Your own mother bore 7 children, 4 survived past infancy. This is not unusual. This is simply the way of things. The tiny cemetery beside the stone church is filled with graves no longer than your forearm. Some marked with rough wooden crosses, most marked by nothing at all. The earth simply takes them back, these small souls who barely had time to leave footprints on the world. As you walk through the village in the early morning, you pass the home of the miller. Yesterday, you heard the wailing. His daughter, just 16, died in childbirth. The midwife did what she could, but the baby was positioned wrongly, and there was nothing to be done. The girl's screams had echoed through the village for hours before falling silent. Now her body lies prepared for burial, wrapped in simple linen, her face finally peaceful after such struggle. This is the 4th woman in your village to die in childbirth. This year alone. Bringing new life into the world is perhaps the most dangerous thing a woman can do. The blood, the tearing, the fever that sometimes follows. These are risks every married woman faces again and again. You have seen strong women who could work in the fields from dawn to dusk, reduced to pale, trembling shadows after difficult births. Some recover. Many do not. The priest will say words over the miller's daughter this afternoon. The village will gather, as it always does. Death requires witnesses, requires acknowledgement. Tomorrow the miller will return to his wheel, and the great stone will turn as it always has, grinding wheat into flour, the rhythm of life continuing despite the absence. But this is only one form of death that walks among you. In the fields, accidents claim their share. Just last month, a young man named Henri was helping with the harvest when the scythe slipped. The blade caught his leg, opening a deep gash that initially seemed manageable. But within days the wound had turned angry and red. Dark lines spread up his thigh. Fever consumed him. He died raving, calling out for his mother, his body burning with heat that no cool cloth could ease. You have learned to recognize the signs of such poisoning of the blood. A wound that should heal but doesn't. The red streaking, the heat. Once these appear, hope fades quickly. The body seems to turn against itself, fighting an invisible enemy it cannot defeat. Infection is a constant threat in a world where the concept of sterilization does not exist. Farmers work with manure and mud, then eat their bread with the same unwashed hands. Wounds are bound with whatever cloth is available. Water comes from wells that sit not far from cesspits. Disease finds fertile ground in such conditions. And then there are the mysterious fevers that sweep through villages like invisible storms. One week, all seems well. The next, household after household falls ill. Bodies ache, heads pound, temperatures soar. Some recover after days of misery. Others slip away, their bodies simply giving up the fight. You have no understanding of germs, of bacteria, of viruses. These concepts lie centuries in the future. What you have instead is a fatalistic acceptance. Illness comes when it comes. Death takes whom it chooses. You can pray, you can light candles, you can seek the help of the village healer with her herbs and charms. But ultimately, these matters rest in God's hands, the healer herself. Old Marguerite, who lives in a cottage at the village edge, is a figure of both hope and suspicion. She knows which plants can ease pain, which can bring down fever, which can help a woman's monthly courses flow more easily. She has delivered most of the babies born in the village for the past 30 years. She has also closed the eyes of most of the dead. Her knowledge is practical, accumulated over decades of observation and passed down from the healer before her. Willow bark for pain, chamomile for calming, garlic for strength, honey for wounds. These remedies sometimes help, sometimes do nothing, sometimes perhaps hasten the end. When death comes to a household, it comes with rituals you have known since childhood. The dying person, if conscious, will make their confession to the priest, receiving final absolution. The family gathers. Prayers are spoken. If the person lingers, the vigil might last for days. Family members taking turns sitting beside the bed, wiping the fevered brow, offering sips of water that might no longer be swallowed. The moment of death itself is watched for. The last breath, the sudden stillness. Someone will close the eyes, tie the jaw shut with a cloth strip to keep the mouth from gaping open. The body must be washed, dressed in the best clothes the family can afford, laid out for the brief period before burial. In summer, burial comes quickly. Bodies cannot wait. The smell of death is unmistakable. Sweet, heavy, sickening. It permeates everything, clings to cloth and hair. In winter, there might be a day or two, but never longer. The earth is hard then, making grave digging difficult labor, but it must be done. The funeral itself is a simple affair for common folk. The priest leads prayers. The body is lowered into the ground. Earth is returned to earth. If the family can afford it, a marker might be placed. Most cannot afford it. Most graves blend back into the landscape within a season or two, remembered only in the hearts of those who love the departed. But now, in this autumn of 1347, something new is coming, something that will make all these ordinary deaths, the childbirths, the accidents, the fevers, seem almost gentle by comparison. Rumors have been traveling along the trade routes, whispers of a terrible sickness in the east. Ships arriving in Mediterranean ports carry not just goods, but stories of entire cities falling silent, of bodies piling in streets, of populations decimated in a matter of weeks. You have heard these rumors in fragments, distorted by distance and translation. They seem fantastical, exaggerated. Sir, no disease could kill with such speed and efficiency. Surely these are travelers' tales, grown larger with each telling. But the rumors persist and grow closer. A traveling merchant who passed through your village last week spoke of strange deaths in Paris. People falling ill in the morning and dead by nightfall. Swellings in the neck and groin, dark blotches on the skin. Some victims raving mad with fever. Others dying quietly, as if simply giving up. The Black Death is coming. You don't know this name yet. You don't understand what's approaching your small, quiet village. You don't know that within the next year, between 1/3 and 1/2 of Europe's entire population will be swept away. You don't know that your village of 200 will be reduced to perhaps 70 or 80 survivors. You don't know that the entire social order of your world is about to be shattered. For now, you continue with your daily tasks. The harvest must be brought in. Wood must be gathered for winter. The rhythms of life continue because they must, because you know no other way. But imagine yourself on a quiet evening, after the work is done, sitting outside your cottage as the sun sets. The air is cooling, harvest smells, cut wheat, turned earth, drift on the breeze. Children play in the last light, their laughter carrying across the village. Everything seems eternal in this moment. These houses, these people, these patterns of life have existed for generations. Your grandparents lived here, your children will live here. The same fields will be plowed, the same festivals celebrated, the same prayers spoken. You cannot imagine that this world is about to end. The plague will arrive. In your village sometime next spring. Perhaps carried by a traveler seeking shelter, perhaps brought by rats that infest the grain stores. However it comes, it will move through your community like fire through dry wheat. The first victim will be someone you know, perhaps old Jacques, who seemed to have survived everything life could throw at him. He will develop a fever, complain of aches, then show the telltale swellings in his neck. Within 2 days he will be dead. Then the miller's son. Then the blacksmith's wife. Then 3 children in one household. Then 2 more in another. The priest will work tirelessly, moving from deathbed to deathbed, offering last rites, comfort, prayers. He too will fall ill. And die. Bodies will pile faster than they can be buried. The careful rituals you have always known, the washing, the dressing, the individual graves, will become impossible. Mass pits will be dug. Bodies will be laid in rows covered with lime and earth, and through it all the survivors will struggle to understand. Is this punishment from God? Is the world ending? What sin could possibly warrant such devastation? But we are getting ahead of ourselves. Tonight, in this autumn of 1347, you sit peacefully outside your cottage. The plague has not yet reached you. Death is still familiar, manageable, woven into the fabric of life in ways you understand. The stars are beginning to appear overhead, the same stars that have watched over this village for centuries. You offer a brief prayer of thanks for another day survived, another evening of peace. Inside, your family waits. There is bread for supper. Perhaps some cheese if you're fortunate. The fire will keep you warm through. The night. Tomorrow you will wake and work again, continuing the patterns that have sustained your people for as long as anyone can remember. This is life. This is death. They walk together, partners in the grand dance of existence. You accept both because you must, because acceptance is the only choice available. The night deepens. You rise, stretch muscles tired from the day's labor, and move toward the warm glow of your hearth. Tomorrow will come, as it always does, bringing whatever fate has prepared. For now there is only this moment, this breath, this heartbeat. The past surrounds you, comforting in its familiarity. The future is unimaginable, which is perhaps a mercy. Now we shift our attention from the village to the grand stages of history, where individual lives, however elevated by power or principle, met endings that echo through centuries. These were not ordinary deaths in quiet rooms. These were executions, assassinations, betrayals, endings that became symbols, warnings, lessons carved into the collective memory of civilizations. Let us begin with a morning in Rome, on the Ides of March 44 BCE. Gaius Julius Caesar wakes in his home, perhaps troubled by the dreams his wife Calpurnia has been having. She has seen omens, dark portents that fill her with dread. She begs him not to go to the Senate meeting today. Stay home, she pleads. Something feels wrong. Caesar is 55 years old, at the height of his power. He has conquered Gaul, crossed the Rubicon, defeated his rivals in civil war, and emerged as the undisputed master of Rome. The Republic, in all but name, has become his personal domain. He has been declared dictator perpetuo, dictator in perpetuity. Thank you, no Roman has ever held such concentrated, permanent power. But power creates enemies as surely as it creates admirers. Imagine yourself as Caesar, moving through your morning routines. You are acutely aware of the resentments that simmer beneath Rome's surface. The old families, the senators who remember when their voices mattered, when the Senate was more than a rubber stamp for your decisions. You know they whisper about kingship, about your ambitions, about the way you've accepted honors that edge dangerously close to divinity. You have been warned before. A soothsayer approached you on the street. Speaking of danger on the Ides of March, you dismissed him, as you dismiss most superstition. You are a practical man, a military genius, someone who has stared down death on battlefields across the known world. What threat could a room full of toga-wearing senators possibly pose? Your friend Marcus Antonius, Mark Antony, will be at the Senate meeting. Decimus Brutus, one of your most trusted commanders, has assured you that all is well. The meeting is routine. There are honors to be bestowed, decisions to be made about the upcoming Parthian campaign. But Calpurnia's fear gnaws at you. The dreams have been so vivid, your statue streaming with blood, Romans bathing their hands in it, smiling. Still, you are Caesar. You cannot be seen to fear shadows. Cannot let it be said that you cowered at home because of a woman's nightmares. Your reputation, carefully built over decades, requires a certain invulnerability. So you dress. You arrange your toga with practiced ease, the heavy woolen garment that marks you as a Roman citizen, as a senator, as a man of distinction. You leave your home and make your way through Rome's streets. The city is awakening around you. Vendors setting up stalls, slaves hurrying on errands for their masters, the smell of baking bread mixing with less pleasant odors from the Tiber River. Rome is crowded, noisy, vibrant. It is the center of the world, and you are its master. The Senate meets in the theater of Pompey today since the regular Curia is under renovation. There is irony in this, meeting in a building constructed by Pompey the Great, your former ally and later enemy, whom you defeated in civil war. His statue stands in the portico, watching with blank marble eyes. As you enter, senators cluster around you. This is normal. Everyone wants a word with Caesar, wants to be seen in your presence, wants favors or to curry influence. The press of bodies, the multiple conversations, the reaching hands, this is the atmosphere of power. You take your seat. The meeting begins. Then Tullius Cimber approaches, ostensibly to plead for his exiled brother's pardon. He grasps your toga, pulling it from your shoulder. This is the signal. What happens next unfolds with terrible swiftness. Servilius Casca strikes first, his dagger catching you in the neck. The wound is not deep, not immediately fatal. You react with the instincts of an old soldier, grabbing Casca's arm, struggling, but then the others close in. Daggers flash in the dim interior light. You try to fight, to defend yourself, but there are too many. 23 senators, men you knew, men you trusted, men you promoted, all converging with blades drawn. The wounds multiply. Your chest, your back, your arms as you try to shield yourself. Blood begins to flow, soaking through your toga, spreading across the white wool in widening crimson stains. You see Marcus Brutus among the attackers, Brutus whom you favored, whom some whispered might be your illegitimate son. The ancient sources tell us you spoke to him. Kapalphai sigmau, taue kapanua macronu, you too, child. Though whether these words were actually spoken or are dramatic invention, we cannot know. What we do know is that you stopped fighting then. Seeing Brutus with a dagger, seeing the extent of the conspiracy, perhaps you realized that this was not something you could overcome through strength or will. Perhaps, in that moment, you understood that your time had ended. You pulled your toga over your head, covering your face. Even in death, Caesar maintained dignity. You would not let them see your final expressions, your fear or pain or despair. You collapsed at the base of Pompey's statue. The irony was complete, defeated not in battle but in a Senate meeting, not by foreign enemies but by fellow Romans, falling at the feet of your old rival's image. 23 stab wounds. The physicians who later examined your body determined that only one had been fatal, a wound to the chest that pierced your heart. The others, in their frenzy, had mostly struck non-lethal blows. Some of the conspirators had even wounded each other in the chaos. Your body lay there as the conspirators fled, as panic spread through the theater, as word raced across Rome that Caesar had been assassinated. The senators scattered like startled birds, some covered in your blood, all terrified of what would happen next. Mark Antony, who had been detained outside the Senate by conspirators on a pretext, arrived to find you dead. Your body was eventually carried home on a litter, one arm hanging down, trailing blood through Rome's streets. 3 slaves bore you, the sources tell us. Just 3 slaves to carry the body of the man who had conquered the known world. A small, undignified procession through the city you had ruled. The assassination, of course, did not save the Republic. Your death sparked civil wars that would last for years. The conspirators achieved nothing except your death and their own eventual downfall. Within 2 years, most would be dead themselves. defeated in battle, executed, or fallen on their own swords. The republic they claimed to be saving died with you. From your bloodied corpse would eventually rise the empire, with your adopted heir Octavian becoming Augustus, the first emperor. The very kingship they sought to prevent would be established, though under a different name. But let us move forward now, across centuries and continents, to another death born of conviction and consequence. The city of Prague, in the year 1415. Jan Hus, a priest and reformer, sits in a cell, awaiting his fate. Hus is perhaps 44 years old, though records of his exact birth date are uncertain. He has spent the last decade preaching reform of the Catholic Church, challenging its wealth, its corruption, its sale of indulgences. He has translated religious texts into Czech, arguing that common people should have access to Scripture in their own language. He has questioned the authority of popes, suggesting that a pontiff in a state of mortal sin has no legitimate power. These positions have made him beloved by many in Bohemia. They have also made him a heretic in the eyes of the Church. Imagine your cell, F as Hus. In this cell, you have been promised safe conduct to the Council of Constance by Emperor Sigismund himself. You came willingly, believing you would have the opportunity to defend your teachings, to explain your positions to the assembled leaders of the Church. Instead, you have been arrested, imprisoned. Your safe conduct guarantee has been dismissed. Promises to heretics, the Church argues, need not be kept. For months now you have languished in various prisons, your health declining, your certainty tested but not broken. You have been given opportunities to recant, to take back your teachings, to submit to church authority, to save your life. The formula is simple. Admit you were wrong, ask forgiveness, promise to teach no more of these dangerous ideas. You cannot do it. Not because you are stubborn, though you are. Not because you seek martyrdom, though you may achieve it. But because you believe, with every fiber of your being, that your positions are true. To recant would be to lie, to betray God, to compromise the very principles that have guided your life, work. So you have refused, again and again, despite pleas and threats and rational arguments about the value of your continued life. You have refused. On this morning of July 6, 1415, you are brought before the council one final time, stripped of your priestly vestments in a humiliating ceremony, each layer removed accompanied by curses and condemnations. A paper crown is placed on your head painted with devils, bearing the word heresiarch, chief of heretics. You are led through the streets of Constance. Citizens line the route, some weeping for you, others jeering. You are taken to a meadow outside the city walls where a stake has been prepared, surrounded by bundles of wood and straw. The mechanics of execution by burning are designed to be both punishment and spectacle. The criminal is chained to the stake, unable to move, unable to escape. The fire is lit at a distance, allowing it to build slowly. The heat intensifies gradually, the smoke thickening. Death, when it comes, may arrive through multiple means: smoke inhalation, heat damage to the lungs, the eventual burning of the body itself. You are given one final chance to recant. Witnesses report that you refused, saying you would not abjure errors you had never taught. You ask instead to be allowed to pray. The fire is lit. What you experience in those next minutes, we can only imagine with horror and compassion. The immediate searing heat, the smoke filling your lungs, each breath becoming more difficult, more painful, your clothes catching fire, your skin blistering, blackening. The terrible awareness that this suffering will continue until your body can no longer sustain life. Witnesses reported that you sang hymns as the flames rose, that your voice carried clear and strong for a time before being lost to the crackling roar of the fire. Whether this is accurate or embellished by your supporters, we cannot know. But it speaks to how you were remembered, as someone who faced unimaginable agony with faith intact. Your body burns for some time. Even after death, the authorities are not finished. Your remains are gathered, bones, ashes, partially burned flesh, and thrown into the Rhine River. This is to prevent relics, to ensure no shrine can be built, no martyrdom site established. You are to be erased, as if you never existed. But of course, martyrdom cannot be prevented by destroying a body. Your death accomplishes exactly what the Church hoped to prevent. You become a symbol, a rallying point. Within years, the Hussite wars will engulf Bohemia, decades of religious conflict directly inspired by your execution. Your teachings will survive, influence Luther, contribute to the Protestant Reformation that will fracture Christianity a century later. The council that condemned you believed it was protecting the Church. Instead, it planted seeds of its own eventual fragmentation. Let us move forward again, to England in the year 1535. Thomas More, former Lord Chancellor, beloved humanist scholar, friend of Erasmus, author of Utopia, sits in the Tower of London. He has been imprisoned for over a year, his health failing, his resources exhausted by the cost of his imprisonment. His crime is silence. He has refused to take the oath of supremacy acknowledging King Henry VIII as supreme head of the Church of England. He has refused to explicitly approve the king's divorce from Catherine of Aragon and marriage to Anne Boleyn. But crucially, he has also refused to explain his reasons, maintained that his silence should be sufficient, that he should not be compelled to speak against his conscience. For Henry, this silence from someone as respected and influential as More is intolerable. It suggests disapproval, undermines the legitimacy of the entire religious transformation Henry has engineered to satisfy his dynastic needs and personal desires. More has been convicted of treason on perjured testimony. The evidence against him is slim, manufactured. Everyone involved knows this. But the verdict is predetermined. Henry wants More's approval or his death. Since approval will not be forthcoming, death it must be. Imagine yourself as More on the morning of July 6, 1535. Coincidentally, exactly 120 years after Huss's execution. You are 57 years old. You were once one of the most powerful men in England. You lived in a grand house in Chelsea. You hosted scholars and nobles. You corresponded with the great minds of Europe. Now you wear a rough prisoner's robe. Your beard has grown long and unkempt during your imprisonment. Your body is thin from inadequate food and lack of exercise. You know you are going to die today. Unlike Huss, you will not burn. As a convicted traitor, your sentence is technically to be hanged, drawn, and quartered. A death of exceptional cruelty involving partial hanging, disembowelment while alive, and dismemberment. But Henry, in a gesture that might be mercy or might be reluctance to appear too vindictive, has commuted your sentence to simple beheading. You are led out to Tower Hill. You need assistance climbing the scaffold stairs. Your body has weakened considerably during imprisonment. There is a famous story, likely apocryphal but illustrative of your character, that you joked with the lieutenant helping you up. I pray you, see me safe up, and for my coming down, Let me shift for myself. Even now, facing death, your wit remains. You are permitted a brief speech. You keep it short, diplomatic. You state that you die the king's good servant, but God's first. You ask the crowd to pray for you, and to bear witness that you die in and for the faith of the Holy Catholic Church. Then you turn to the executioner, forgive him for what he is about to do, and ask him to wait until you have arranged your beard. It has grown long during imprisonment, and you joke that it has committed no treason and should not be harmed. You kneel. You position your head on the block. The executioner raises his axe. The blow falls. If the executioner is skilled, death is nearly instantaneous. The heavy blade severs the spinal cord, cuts through neck bones and blood vessels in one stroke. Consciousness ceases within seconds. There may be some brief continuation of brain activity. The eyes might move, the mouth might work. But awareness is gone. Your head falls into the waiting basket. Your body slumps forward, blood pouring from the stump of your neck onto the scaffold boards. The crowd watches in silence or with scattered responses, some approving, some horrified, most simply present to witness what power does to those who resist it. Your head is later displayed on London Bridge, as was customary for traitors. It remains there for a month before your daughter Margaret Roper allegedly bribes someone to take it down. She keeps it, preserves it, eventually is buried with it. A tangible connection between father and daughter that survives even death and disgrace. Your body is buried in the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula within the Tower of London, in an unmarked grave. You join other executed nobles there, a growing collection of those who displease their monarchs. Within a few years, the political landscape will shift again. Henry will tire of Anne Boleyn, the woman whose cause partly led to your death, and have her executed. The religious settlement of England will continue to oscillate between Protestant and Catholic for decades. Your silence, your stand on conscience, will be remembered long after the specific controversies that led to your death have faded. In 1935, exactly 400 years after your execution, you will be canonized as a saint by the Catholic Church. The martyrdom that Henry tried to prevent by keeping your death relatively quiet and dignified will be formally recognized. The pattern repeats throughout history. Conviction meeting power, principle colliding with political necessity. The deaths that result are rarely gentle. Marie Antoinette, walking to the guillotine in 1793. Her hair turned white from stress and fear during months of imprisonment. Maintaining dignity even as the mob jeered, even as she accidentally stepped on the executioner's foot, and apologized. An instinctive courtesy from a woman raised to be queen, meaningless in that context, yet somehow touching. The blade falls. The head is held up to the crowd. A woman who once hosted lavish parties at Versailles, who played at being a shepherdess in her private hamlet, whose supposed utterance "let them eat cake" became a symbol of aristocratic disconnect, reduced to a lifeless object, displayed for revolutionary approval. Or Charles I of England, in 1649, stepping onto the scaffold wearing 2 shirts because he did not want the cold January weather to make him shiver, lest observers think he trembled from fear. Making a speech defending divine right and royal prerogative to a crowd kept too far back to hear his words. Checking the position of the block, arranging his hair so it would not interfere with the blade's path, maintaining every inch of royal bearing up to the final moment. The executioner, masked to hide his identity, struck. The crowd surged forward to dip cloths in the royal blood, seeking relics or souvenirs. A king's death, meant to establish parliamentary supremacy, instead sent shockwaves through European monarchies and contributed to the eventual restoration of the monarchy in England within 11 years. These deaths share common elements. The condemned face their end with whatever grace or courage they can muster. The mechanisms of execution are public, ceremonial, designed to demonstrate power and deter others. The bodies become symbolic, venerated by supporters, celebrated by enemies, analyzed by historians. But whether the death is noble or ignoble, dignified or desperate, the result is the same. Life ends. A consciousness ceases. Whatever ambitions, beliefs, or convictions animated these individuals becomes memory, interpretation, historical record. Their deaths become larger than their lives. Caesar's assassination shaped centuries of political thought about tyranny and republicanism. Huss's burning helps fracture Christianity. More's execution exemplifies conscience versus authority. They die, but the reverberations continue, waves spreading outward through time. Imagine yourself present at any of these deaths. The crowd surrounding the scaffold or standing in the Senate. The smell of blood and fear. The strange intimacy of watching someone transition from life to death, from person to corpse to symbol. Would you look away? Would you watch steadily, believing yourself witness to history? Would you cheer or weep or stand in silent contemplation? These questions have no comfortable answers. We like to believe we would be on the right side, would recognize injustice, would react with appropriate emotion. But we are separated from these moments by centuries, by comfort, by the knowledge of how the story ends. The people who actually witnessed these deaths had none of those advantages. They lived in the immediate moment, influenced by contemporary pressures and beliefs, unable to see the long arc of historical consequence. And so the executions proceeded. The condemned died. History turned its pages. Let your mind rest now with these images, not with celebration or with horror, but with simple acknowledgement. These deaths happened. These lives ended. The world continued. The mechanisms of power, the conflicts of conscience, the fragility of life, all remain constant across centuries. The names and circumstances change, but the fundamental dynamics persist. We move now toward different tragedies, deaths wrapped in mystery and speculation, endings that raise more questions than they answer. But first, let yourself simply breathe. These heavy stories deserve their moment of reflection before we move forward. We turn now from the known to the uncertain, from documented executions to deaths shrouded in mystery. Here, in the gaps of historical record, speculation mingles with evidence, and tragedy takes on qualities of puzzle and enigma. Some deaths leave clear marks, written accounts, physical evidence, chains of causation we can trace with confidence. But others slip into shadow, leaving us with fragments, contradictions, questions that may never find answers. Let us begin with a death that occurred nearly 5,000 years ago, yet was discovered less than a century past. The year is 1991. Two German hikers are traversing the Ötztal Alps on the border between Austria and Italy. It is September, late in the hiking season, and the snow that typically covers these high passes has melted more than usual due to an exceptionally warm summer. Helmut and Erika Simon notice something unusual protruding from the ice. What appears to be the upper body of a person, face down, partially embedded in the frozen surface. They assume, naturally, that they have found a recently deceased mountaineer. The Alps claim victims regularly. lost hikers, fallen climbers, people who underestimate the mountain's dangers. They report their discovery. A recovery effort begins. But as the body is extracted from the ice, as researchers begin to examine what has been found, they realize this is no modern tragedy. The body is ancient, preserved by the ice in remarkable condition, eventually determined to have died approximately 5,300 years ago, during the Copper Age, making him one of the oldest and most well-preserved human bodies ever discovered. He is given various names: Ötzi, the Iceman, Frozen Fritz. But to imagine him as he was, we must move backward, far beyond recorded history, into the deep past. Imagine yourself as this man, whom we will call Ötzi, on what will be your final day of life. You are approximately 45 years old, ancient by the standards of your time. Most people born in your era do not live past 30. That you have survived into your 5th decade speaks to either exceptional constitution, remarkable luck, or both. Your body bears the marks of a hard life. You have arthritis in your joints, your knees, your back, your hips. You have evidence of past injuries, cracked ribs that healed, perhaps imperfectly. Your teeth are worn down from eating grain ground with stone, the inevitable particles of rock and grit wearing away the enamel over decades. You have tattoos, small lines and crosses marking various joints and areas of your body. These are not decorative. They appear to be therapeutic, placed over areas of arthritis and degeneration, perhaps part of a primitive form of acupuncture or pain management. On this final day, you are high in the mountains, traveling through a pass that sits over 10,000 feet above sea level. Why are you here? This question haunts researchers. You carry with you an array of sophisticated tools and equipment. An unfinished longbow made of yew wood, suggesting perhaps you are in the process of crafting or repairing weapons. A copper axe with a carefully carved yew handle, a valuable and prestigious item in an age when metalworking is still relatively new. A quiver containing arrows, some finished, some unfinished. A flint dagger with a wooden handle. A backpack frame, containers made of birch bark. A net that might be used for trapping birds. You wear carefully constructed clothing, a cloak woven from grass, leather leggings, a coat made from different animal skins stitched together, shoes insulated with grass for warmth, a bearskin cap. Everything about your gear speaks to specialized knowledge, to cultural sophistication, to a community with developed technologies and skills. Your stomach contains your last meal, meat from ibex and red deer, some grain, roots, fruits. You ate not long before your death, perhaps just hours before, but you also carry signs of recent trauma. Cuts on your hands and wrists, defensive wounds, the kind of injuries someone receives when fighting with a knife, when trying to ward off blows, protect themselves from attack. Most significantly, there is an arrowhead lodged in your left shoulder. It has penetrated deeply, cutting the subclavian artery. This is a fatal wound. Blood would have poured into your chest cavity. Your left arm would have become useless almost immediately. Shock would have set in quickly. You are dying and you know it. So why are you so high in the mountains? If you were fleeing attackers, why come this way into terrain that is difficult even for a healthy person? The pass you're attempting to cross is treacherous, cold, dangerous. Perhaps you were already traveling through the mountains when the attack occurred. Perhaps you were part of a trading expedition, moving goods between valleys. The attack happens lower down, and you flee upward, seeking escape, adrenaline driving you despite your wound. Or perhaps you were already in the mountains, and your attackers followed you there. Perhaps this is the culmination of a pursuit that lasted hours or days. Perhaps there was conflict in your community, warfare between groups, a blood feud, a personal vendetta, and you were trying to escape over the mountains to safety on the other side. We will never know the full story. What we know is this: you made it to this high pass, to this particular spot in the mountains, and there your strength failed. Did you stop to rest and simply not get up again? Did you collapse suddenly as blood loss and shock finally overwhelmed you? Did you realize in those final moments that you would die here? You lay down or fell face down on the rocky ground. Perhaps you were trying to shelter behind a rocky outcrop. Perhaps you simply could go no farther. The cold of the high mountains envelops you. Even in summer, this elevation is frigid, especially at night. Your body temperature begins to drop. Hypothermia accelerates the effects of your wound. Consciousness fades. Within hours, perhaps less, you are dead. And then, an extraordinary preservation begins. Snow falls, covering your body. More snow accumulates. The location, a small depression in the rocky ground, creates a perfect environment. Your body freezes, desiccates, mummifies. The ice protects you from scavengers, from decomposition, from the normal processes that return bodies to the earth. For over 5,000 years, you remain there, frozen, forgotten, while civilizations rise and fall in the valleys below, while Bronze Age gives way to Iron Age, while Rome rises and falls, while the Middle Ages pass into modernity, while wars sweep across Europe and the map is redrawn countless times, you lie in your icy grave, perfectly preserved, waiting. The ice shifts and moves, glacial dynamics slowly relocating your position, but never exposing you fully. You remain buried, protected, suspended in time, until that September day in 1991, when the Simons spot something brown against the white ice, and make a discovery that will captivate the world. The forensic analysis of your body reveals details that bring you into sharp focus as an individual. The contents of your stomach tell us what you ate. The pollen preserved in your digestive tract tells us the season, late spring or early summer, and even traces your path through different elevations on your last days. The wear on your teeth suggests your age. The DNA preserved in your cells tells us about your ancestry, your genetic relationships, even some of your physical characteristics. You likely had brown eyes. Your hair was dark brown, probably wavy. Your blood type was O positive. You were lactose intolerant, unable to digest milk properly, though this was common in your era before the genetic adaptations that allow milk consumption spread through European populations. You had Lyme disease, evidence of the bacteria present in your DNA. You may have suffered from intestinal parasites. You had cardiovascular disease, your arteries showing signs of calcification. You were not a perfectly healthy man enjoying a peaceful death. You were middle-aged, arthritic, diseased, and you died violently. But who were you, beyond the physical details, beyond the artifacts and preservation? Who was the consciousness that inhabited this body? Did you have a family waiting for your return? A wife, children, wondering why you never came back from wherever you had gone? Did anyone search for you, or were they killed in the same conflict that claimed your life? Were you a person of importance in your community, given the quality of your equipment? The copper axe alone suggests wealth or status. Or were you simply skilled, a craftsman or hunter who had accumulated good tools over a lifetime of use? Did you have a name? Of course you did. A name your mother called you as a child. A name your companions used. A name that died with everyone who knew you lost to time irretrievably when you lay down in that mountain pass. When you drew your last breath, did you think about your life? Did you feel regret, fear, acceptance? Did you pray to whatever gods your people worshipped? Or did shock and cold numb your mind beyond such contemplations? These questions have no answers. You remain mysterious despite being among the most thoroughly studied human bodies in existence. We know what you ate for your last meal, but not what you thought as you ate it. We know you died from an arrow wound, but not who shot the arrow or why. Your death creates more questions than it resolves, and perhaps that is fitting. Mystery is more enduring than certainty. Let us move forward through millennia to another death wrapped in shadow and speculation. England. D. Early September 1483. The Tower of London, which we have already visited in another context, holds two young boys. Edward V, aged 12, and Richard of Shrewsbury, Duke of York, aged 9. They are the sons of the late King Edward IV, who died suddenly in April. Young Edward was supposed to become king, to be crowned and rule England with the guidance of advisors until he came of age. Instead, he and his brother are housed in the Tower, ostensibly for their protection during the preparations for Edward's coronation, but increasingly as prisoners. Their uncle, Richard, Duke of Gloucester, has declared their parents' marriage invalid, the boys illegitimate, and himself the rightful king. He has taken the throne as Richard III. The boys who should have been king and heir are now obstacles, inconvenient reminders of claims that challenge Richard's legitimacy. Imagine yourself as the elder boy, Edward. You were raised to be king, educated in princely accomplishments, given every reason to believe that your father's crown would pass to you, that you would rule England, that your life would be one of power and consequence. Then your father died. You were at Ludlow Castle, in the Welsh Marches, when news arrived. You began the journey to London with your household, expecting to be crowned, to take your place on the throne despite your youth. But your uncle intercepted you, arrested your mother's relatives and supporters, took control of your person, brought you to London not in triumph but in a progression that felt increasingly like captivity. Your mother, Queen Elizabeth Woodville, fled into sanctuary at Westminster Abbey with your siblings, sensing the danger. You and your brother were already in your uncle's custody. She sent Richard to join you, perhaps believing safety lay in your being together, perhaps having no choice. Now you live in the Tower's royal apartments. These are not dungeons. They are comfortable rooms where royal persons have stayed before. But the guards are not there for your protection. The windows, while providing views of the city, might as well be barred. You are prisoners, though no one uses that word. You see fewer and fewer people as weeks pass. Your attendants are reduced. Visitors cease to come. You and your brother spend your days together, playing perhaps as children do, but increasingly aware that something is terribly wrong. People see you occasionally, through windows, walking in the Tower gardens. But these sightings become less frequent, then stop altogether. Sometime in the autumn of 1483, you disappear from recorded history. What happened? This question has obsessed historians, novelists, and researchers for over 5 centuries. The traditional narrative, promoted by Henry VII after he defeated Richard III and took the throne in 1485, is straightforward. Richard had you and your brother murdered to secure his position. The story goes that he ordered your deaths, that agents came to your rooms, that you were smothered with pillows, a method that leaves few marks. allowing burial without obvious evidence of violence. Some accounts suggest you saw death coming, that you knelt together in prayer, that you comforted each other, the elder brother reassuring the younger, that you died together quickly, without prolonged suffering. Others suggest one of you was killed first, the other watching in horror before being murdered in turn. Some versions include details about where your bodies were buried, under a staircase in the tower, hidden in unmarked graves. But this narrative, though widely believed for centuries, is not necessarily accurate. It comes from sources hostile to Richard, writing after his death, with political reasons to blacken his reputation. Alternative theories abound. Perhaps you were not killed but smuggled away, hidden, raised in obscurity. Perhaps you died of natural causes. Illness was common, child mortality high. Perhaps someone else ordered your deaths without Richard's knowledge. Perhaps Richard did not even know you died and you disappeared through some other means. In 1674, workmen renovating the tower discovered a wooden box containing the skeletons of 2 children buried beneath a staircase. The bones were assumed to be yours and were reburied in Westminster Abbey. In 1933, they were briefly examined but not thoroughly analyzed by modern standards. The examination suggested they were the right age to be the princes, but could not prove identity definitively. Modern requests to exhume and analyze the bones using DNA technology have been denied. The remains rest in Westminster Abbey, their identity uncertain, the mystery preserved. So we are left with questions. Were you murdered? If so, by whose order? Did you know death was coming, or did it arrive without warning? Did you cry out, fight, plead, or did shock and fear silence you? Was it quick? Being smothered takes several minutes, an eternity when you're struggling for air, when panic overwhelms everything else. Did you lose consciousness quickly, or did those minutes stretch into horrible awareness? Or is the entire murder narrative wrong? Did you sicken and die naturally, your deaths then covered up to prevent political complications? Did you survive childhood only to die later, elsewhere, your identity lost or deliberately obscured? These questions have no certain answers. Multiple books have been written analyzing evidence, proposing theories, defending or condemning Richard III. Passionate arguments rage between historians. Your death, or deaths, or disappearance, remains one of history's most famous unsolved mysteries. In the absence of certainty, we are left with the human dimension. 2 boys, young and vulnerable, caught in political currents far beyond their control or understanding. Whether murdered or not, whether by Richard's order or someone else's or no one's, they disappeared from life into legend. Their names are remembered, their fate is debated, but their voices, their thoughts, their final experiences, these are lost, irretrievable, leaving only silence and speculation. One more mysterious death, closer to our own time, yet no less puzzling. June 30th, 1908. The Tunguska region of Siberia, Russia. A vast remote forest, sparsely populated far from cities or towns. At approximately 7:17 in the morning, something explodes in the atmosphere above this region. The blast is enormous, estimated at 10 to 15 megatons, roughly 1,000 times more powerful than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. The explosion occurs several miles above the ground, but its effects are catastrophic. An area of 2,000 square kilometers, roughly 800 square miles, of forest is flattened. 80 million trees are knocked down, falling in a radial pattern pointing away from the blast epicenter. The blast wave is detected by seismic stations across Eurasia. Witnesses hundreds of miles away report seeing a bright light, feeling intense heat, hearing tremendous noise. What caused this explosion remains uncertain. The most widely accepted theory is that a small asteroid or comet, perhaps 100 to 200 meters across, entered Earth's atmosphere and exploded before reaching the ground. An airburst that released immense energy without leaving a traditional impact crater. But here is the haunting element. We do not know if anyone died. The region was extremely remote. The few settlements nearby were small, isolated. Indigenous Evenki people lived in the area, following traditional patterns of hunting and herding reindeer. Reports from the aftermath mention casualties indirectly. Some accounts suggest that reindeer herds were killed by the blast. There are stories of a hunter who died from the effects of the explosion, though details are vague and unverifiable. Some Evenki camps may have been in the affected area, their inhabitants killed instantly or dying later from injuries. But we have no confirmed death toll, no names, no certain knowledge of who, if anyone, died that morning. Imagine yourself as one of the Evenki people, perhaps camped with your family in the forests of Tunguska. It is early morning. You have risen with the sun, as you always do. The day promises to be warm. It is summer in Siberia, the brief season when the land thaws and life becomes easier. You're preparing breakfast, perhaps, or tending to the reindeer, or engaged in the thousand small tasks that sustain life in this remote place. Your world is the forest, the sky, the rhythm of seasons, the pattern. As your people have followed for generations. Then suddenly the sky itself seems to tear open. A brilliant light brighter than the sun floods your vision. Heat washes over you, intense and immediate. The air seems to roar, a sound beyond anything you have ever experienced. The ground trembles beneath your feet. If you are close to the epicenter, you have perhaps a second to register these sensations before the blast wave arrives. Trees around you are suddenly ripped from the earth, thrown like twigs in a storm. The force is incomprehensible, irresistible. Your body is lifted, thrown, or crushed by falling timber. Death, if it comes, is likely swift. The violence is too extreme for survival. Consciousness ends in an instant of fire and force. If you are farther from the epicenter, you might survive the initial blast but be injured, burned by the heat flash, struck by debris, deafened by the sound. You might live long enough to witness the devastation, to see the forest flattened, to feel pain from your injuries before succumbing hours or days later. Or perhaps you are far enough away to survive unharmed, but you lose family members. You return to find your camp destroyed, your relatives dead or missing, the landscape transformed beyond recognition. But we don't know. The Russian government was in no position to conduct thorough investigations of remote Siberian forests in 1908. The first scientific expedition to the site did not arrive until 1927, nearly 20 years after the event. By then, physical evidence of casualties would have long since disappeared, and any survivors' accounts would be fragmentary, translated through multiple languages and cultural contexts. So, we are left with a massive explosion, a vast area of destruction, and only uncertainty about whether human lives were lost. The explosion was real, the physical evidence indisputable, but the human cost, unknown. This might seem like a strange death to include in our collection. There are no confirmed victims to memorialize, no individuals whose stories we can trace. But perhaps that is precisely the point. Throughout history, countless deaths have occurred without record or remembrance. people whose names we will never know, whose lives left no mark on written history, whose final moments passed unwitnessed and unmourned except by those close to them, who may themselves have died, leaving no one to carry memories forward. The Tunguska event reminds us that tragedy does not require documentation to be real. Those trees fell, that forest burned, and if people died that morning, as seems likely though unproven, they died without their deaths being recorded in any ledger that survives. Their absence from history does not mean their deaths were less tragic, less painful, less final. It means only that we have lost even the memory of their passing. How many deaths throughout human history have vanished this way? How many people lived, suffered, and died without leaving any trace we can detect? The archaeological record captures perhaps 1%, perhaps far less, of all human lives. The written record captures even fewer. Most people who have ever lived are utterly lost to history, their entire existences reduced to statistical probabilities and demographic models. This is the ultimate mystery. Not the specific circumstances of specific deaths, but the vast ocean of unknown lives, ND deaths that form the background noise of human existence. We remember Caesar's assassination because it was documented, because he was powerful, because the consequences were significant. We puzzle over the princes in the tower because they were royal, because their deaths had political implications, because the mystery tantalized later generations. But the Evenki hunter who might have died at Tunguska, the peasant family who perished in the Black Death, the child who drowned in a river 3,000 years ago, the old woman who died alone in a hut at the edge of some forgotten village. These deaths happened. These were human lives, with all the complexity and consciousness that implies. But they are gone beyond recovery, beyond memory, beyond any possibility of acknowledgement. Perhaps that is the deepest tragedy. Not the dramatic deaths that echo through history, but the quiet extinctions that occur in darkness, unnoticed and unremembered. The universe is indifferent to our individual passings. History forgets most of us. Time erases nearly everything. What remains are fragments, hints, mysteries that can never be fully solved. And perhaps that uncertainty, that unknowability, is something to hold gently as we continue our journey through these darkened halls of the past. We have explored the deaths that puzzle us, that resist our attempts at certainty. Now we turn toward one final segment, examining how death was experienced differently depending on one's place in society, how power and wealth and status shaped even this most universal of human experiences. But first, rest in the space of mystery. Let unanswered questions be unanswered. Let the lost remain lost. The is a strange peace in acknowledging the limits of what we can know. Death comes to everyone, eventually. This is perhaps the only truly universal human experience. Rich or poor, powerful or powerless, loved or lonely, all lives end. Yet the manner of death, the circumstances surrounding it, the treatment of the dying and the dead, these vary enormously depending on one's position in society's hierarchy. Let us explore these contrasts, these inequalities that persist even in humanity's most leveling experience. Imagine yourself in London, in the year 1665. The Great Plague has come to the city, the last major outbreak of bubonic plague that will strike England. By the time it runs its course, approximately 100,000 people will die, nearly a quarter of London's population. But let us observe how this shared catastrophe is experienced differently, depending on whether you are wealthy or poor. First, picture yourself as a prosperous merchant. You live in a comfortable house in one of London's better neighborhoods. You have servants, resources, options. When the first cases of plague appear in the poorer parishes, St. Giles in the Fields, the areas where the poor live crowded together in unsanitary conditions, you hear about it but do not feel immediately threatened. As the outbreak worsens, as the bills of mortality, the weekly death counts, begin to climb alarmingly, you make a decision available to those with means. You leave London. You have a country estate or relatives in the countryside, or at minimum the resources to rent accommodations in a small town far from the infected city. You pack your household, family, valued servants, important possessions, and you depart. The journey itself is not without difficulty. Towns and villages along the way are increasingly reluctant to accept Londoners, fearing they carry contagion. You may be turned away from inns, refused entry to certain areas, forced to prove you come from an uninfected parish, documents that can be falsified if necessary, and if you have the money, but eventually you establish yourself somewhere safe, somewhere the air is clean, the population sparse, the risk minimal. You wait out the plague in relative comfort and safety. Some of your servants may have been left behind to guard your London property. Some may have family in the city they cannot abandon. These people do not have your options. They remain exposed to whatever comes. By the time the plague subsides and you return to London, perhaps a year later, perhaps longer, the city has been transformed. Streets that were once familiar now feel haunted. Buildings stand empty, their inhabitants dead or fled. The atmosphere is one of exhaustion, of survival, of grim relief that the worst has passed. You have lost acquaintances, certainly, perhaps even friends, but your immediate family has survived intact, protected by your wealth and your ability to escape. Now imagine yourself as a poor laborer in the same London in the same year. You live in one of the crowded parishes where plague first appears. Your home is a rented room in a building that houses multiple families, where privacy is non-existent and sanitation primitive. You share a common courtyard with neighbors, draw water from a shared well, dispose of waste in a communal cesspit that is emptied irregularly if at all. When plague comes to your neighborhood, you cannot leave. Where would you go? You have no country estate, no rural relatives willing and able to take in your entire family. Your income depends on daily labor in the city. If you stop working, you stop eating. It is that simple. So you remain, even as death begins to move through the crowded houses like an invisible predator. Your neighbor's family falls ill first. The father develops a fever, complains of aches, then shows the telltale swellings, buboes, in his groin and neck. Within 3 days he is dead. Then his wife sickens. Then 2 of their children, the local authorities, attempting to control the spread, impose brutal measures. When plague is confirmed in a household, the entire family is locked inside. The door is boarded shut from the outside, marked with a red cross and the words, "Lord have mercy upon us." Guards are posted to ensure no one escapes. The theory is quarantine, keep the sick separated from the healthy. The reality is often a death sentence for everyone sealed inside, sick and healthy alike. Healthy family members, locked in close quarters with the infected, almost invariably become infected themselves. Food and supplies are supposed to be delivered, but the system is inconsistent, chaotic. Families locked inside sometimes starve before the plague can kill them. You watch houses in your street being sealed, one after another. The red crosses multiply, the sounds that emerge from locked houses, moaning, crying, desperate pleas, haunt the neighborhood. Eventually these sounds cease, replaced by silence more disturbing than the noise. The dead are collected at night by carts making rounds through afflicted neighborhoods. "Bring out your dead," the collectors call, their voices muffled by cloths wrapped around their faces, useless protection against plague, but psychologically comforting perhaps. Bodies are carried out, sometimes by surviving family members, sometimes by the collectors themselves, entering houses where everyone has died. The corpses are thrown onto carts, piled without ceremony or dignity, transported to mass graves, plague pits, on the city's outskirts. These pits are enormous trenches, dug deep and wide, into which bodies are placed in layers. Dozens, hundreds, then thousands of corpses, covered with quicklime and earth. No individual graves, no markers, no possibility of later identification or commemoration. You know that if plague comes to your household, this is the fate awaiting your body. No proper burial, no funeral service, no time for grieving. Just collection and disposal, your remains mixed indiscriminately with those of strangers. The fear is constant, crushing. Every ache might be the beginning. Every fever might be the end. You watch yourself and your family with anxious attention, searching for signs, dreading what you might find. Work becomes difficult to find. Many businesses have closed. Those with money have left. The economy of the city contracts sharply. You struggle to feed your family even as food prices rise due to shortages and disruption. If you do contract plague, you have no access to physicians. Doctors serve the wealthy, and even those doctors have mostly fled the city. You might find a plague nurse, often a woman of dubious skill, perhaps someone desperate enough to take a dangerous job for pay. Perhaps someone with a genuine desire to help but little medical knowledge. Treatments, such as they are, range from useless to actively harmful. Bleeding the sick, applying poultices to the buboes, burning aromatic herbs to purify the air, prayers and charms. Nothing actually works because no one understands what plague is or how it spreads. If the buboes burst and drain, you might survive. The body sometimes overcomes the infection, but many victims die before this happens, the infection overwhelming their systems. Others develop plague pneumonia, the disease spreading to the lungs, and die cough. In blood, drowning in fluid, their final hours a suffocating horror. Throughout this catastrophe, you are essentially invisible to history. You have no one to write about your suffering, no records kept of your struggle. The bills of mortality record deaths in aggregate. Plague 1,200 this week, but not individual names, not individual stories. You are a statistic, a number contributing to totals that historians will later analyze. Whether you survive or perish, your specific experience will be lost, forgotten, utterly erased from historical memory. This is death's inequality made manifest. The same disease, the same city, the same moment in time, but utterly different experiences based solely on wealth and social position. Let us shift our view to a different context, a different form of inequality, the Titanic, April 15, 1912. The great ship has struck an iceberg and is sinking. There are not enough lifeboats for everyone aboard. Decisions must be made about who lives and who dies. The principle women and children first is applied, but even this is implemented differently depending on class. First-class passengers, wealthy industrialists, aristocrats, people traveling in luxury, have several advantages. Their cabins are higher in the ship, closer to the deck where lifeboats are located. When the alarm sounds, they have less distance to travel, less chaos to navigate. They are assisted by crew members who know them by name, who are accustomed to serving them, who guide them to boat stations with attentiveness and care. They are allowed to gather their jewelry, their important documents, their furs and warm clothing before ascending to the deck. When they arrive at the lifeboats, space is made for them. First-class women and children board lifeboats that are often not filled to capacity, launched half-empty because crew members are uncertain about how many people the boats can safely hold, or because there are not enough first-class passengers to fill them, or because speed of launching is prioritized over maximum capacity. Approximately 97% of first-class women and children survive. Almost all of them find places in boats. Their wealth and status translate directly into survival. Now imagine yourself as a third-class passenger, a poor immigrant traveling in steerage, hoping to start a new life in America. Your cabin is deep in the ship's bowels, accessible through a maze of corridors and rails. When the collision occurs, you feel the shudder but do not immediately understand what it means. No one comes to inform you, to guide you, to explain the danger. By the time you realize the severity of the situation, gates have been locked to prevent third-class passengers from flooding the upper decks, officially to maintain order, practically to ensure first- and second-class passengers board lifeboats first. You and your fellow third-class passengers must find alternative routes upward, navigating unfamiliar passages, encountering barriers and locked doors, lost in a part of the ship you have never been permitted to enter. When you finally reach the deck, if you reach the deck, many of the lifeboats have already launched. The spaces that remain are limited. Crew members, overwhelmed and panicking, may turn you away, insisting boats are full when they are not, prioritizing passengers who seem more important. If you are a man, even a young man, your chances are virtually nil. The women and children first principle is applied most strictly to third-class passengers. Men are held back, sometimes forcibly, while boats leave partially empty. If you are a woman with children, you face an impossible choice. Can you get all your children into a boat? What if there is only room for some? Do you divide your family, or do you stay together and accept death? Some mothers made the agonizing decision to send their children with strangers while remaining behind themselves. Others refused to be separated and died with their children. Approximately 46% of third-class passengers die. The majority of third-class men, nearly 90%, perish. Your chances of survival are directly correlate. With your ticket class, with your wealth, with your social position. The freezing water of the North Atlantic shows no such discrimination, of course. Once in the water, a first-class passenger and a third-class passenger die at the same rate. Hypothermia claims both within minutes. But access to the lifeboats, access to survival, this is profoundly unequal. In the aftermath, even the recovery of bodies reflects inequality. Ships sent to collect the dead return with hundreds of corpses. First-class victims are embalmed, placed in coffins, returned to their families for proper burial. Third-class victims and crew members, if identified, receive more basic treatment. Many are buried at sea from the recovery ships, their bodies weighted and consigned to the depths. The poorest victims are often unidentifiable. No documents, no possessions that survived, no one who can or will pay for their return, and simply disappear into the ocean's anonymity. This disaster, more than most, reveals the stark truth. In moments of crisis, social hierarchies assert themselves with brutal clarity. Those with power and privilege survive. Those without perish disproportionately. Let us examine one more contrast from yet another angle: the death of a monarch versus the death of a peasant in medieval times. Both are human, both die, but the experiences could hardly be more different. Imagine yourself as King Louis XIV of France, the Sun King, dying in 1715, after a reign of 72 years, the longest of any European monarch. You are 76 years old. You have lived longer than most people of your era could hope to live. You have been king since childhood, the absolute center of French political and cultura life, for nearly 3/4 of a century. Now gangrene is spreading through your leg. The pain is intense. Physicians have tried everything, various potions, prayers, applying relics of saints to the affected limb. Nothing works. The infection advances steadily. You know you are dying. You have time to prepare. You spend your final weeks arranging your affairs, saying farewell to family and court members, receiving last rites, making peace with God. You lie in your magnificent bed at Versailles, surrounded by luxury even in death. Courtiers maintain vigil. Priests pray constantly. Physicians monitor your condition, though they can do nothing to stop the inevitable. Your room is crowded. Dozens of people have the right to be present at a royal death. This is not privacy, it is theater. Your death is a public event, witnessed and documented, because you are not merely a person but an institution, and institutions require proper transitions. You offer advice to your heir, your great-grandson who will become Louis XV. You apologize to those you may have wronged. You accept the final sacraments. Everything is done with ceremony, with ritual, with the solemnity befitting a king. When you finally die, on September 1st, 1715, the machinery of royal succession immediately activates. Your body is embalmed, prepared for viewing, laid in state so that subjects can pay respects. Your heart is removed, placed in a separate container. This is traditional for French monarchs. Your intestines are likewise separately preserved. Your funeral is an elaborate affair planned long in advance, executed with precision. Nobles from across Europe attend. Masses are said. Eulogies delivered. Your beau is eventually interred in the royal necropolis at Saint-Denis, in a tomb befitting your status. You are remembered. Your reign is analyzed by historians. Books are written about you. Your name remains known centuries after your death. You achieved a form of immortality through fame and historical significance. Now imagine yourself as a peasant dying at roughly the same time, perhaps even on the same day as Louis XIV, but in a small village, far from Versailles. You are perhaps 50 years old, though you are not certain. Precise birth records were not kept for people of your class. You have lived a life of hard labor, of limited horizons, of acceptance that this is simply how the world works. You are dying of pneumonia, perhaps, or some other respiratory illness. You have been coughing for weeks, each breath a struggle. You have tried to keep working. You must, to feed your family. But eventually you became too weak. Now you lie on your rough bed in your small cottage, your body burning with fever. Your family surrounds you. But this is not ceremony. This is grief, fear, practical concern about how they will survive without you. Your wife knows she will struggle to maintain the land, to pay the dues owed to the local lord, to keep the family fed through the coming winter. A priest comes, if you are fortunate, to hear your confession and administer last rites. This is important to you. You have been taught your entire life that dying without the sacraments imperils your immortal soul. The priest's presence brings comfort. reassurance that you will not face judgment unprepared. But there is no crowd of courtiers, no elaborate preparations. Just your family, perhaps a few bores, sitting with you as your breathing becomes more labored, more irregular. You die in the night, quietly, your hand held by your wife. There is no documentation of the exact moment, no recording of final words. You simply cease, and the world continues. Your body is washed by your wife and daughters. Wrapped in a simple shroud, your best shirt perhaps, or a piece of linen set aside for this purpose. Laid out in your cottage for a brief period so neighbors can pay respects. The funeral is simple. The priest says prayers. Your body is carried to the church cemetery, lowered into a grave dug by neighbors. A wooden cross marks the spot, carved with your name if you are fortunate. More likely it is unmarked or marked with initials. Within a generation or two, the exact location of your grave will be forgotten. The wooden marker will rot away. Your burial place will be indistinguishable from the earth around it. Your name survives in your family's memory for a few generations, perhaps. Your grandchildren remember you. Your great-grandchildren hear stories. After that, you fade into complete anonymity. Within a century, it is as if you never existed. No books are written about you. No historians analyze your life. You leave no mark on the grand narratives of history. You were born, you lived, you died. The sum of your existence from history's perspective is nothing. And yet, and this is crucial, your death was no less significant to you than Louis XIV's death was to him. Your fear was equally real. Your pain was equally intense. Your awareness of life ending, of consciousness ceasing, of leaving behind people you loved. This was identical in its fundamental nature to what a king or emperor experiences. Death is democratizing in this sense. The subjective experience of dying transcends social categories. A peasant facing death feels the same dread, the same regret, the same instinctive resistance as a monarch. The rich man's heart stops with no more ceremony than the poor man's, whatever elaborate rituals might surround the event. But society, both in the moment and in memory, treats these deaths as incomparably different. One is significant, worthy of documentation, analysis, commemoration. The other is essentially irrelevant except to the immediate family, forgotten within living memory, contributing nothing to the historical record beyond the most basic statistics. This inequality extends even to how we remember mass tragedies. When the Titanic sank, killing approximately 1,500 people, it became one of history's most famous disasters. Books, films, documentaries, endless analysis. We know the names of many victims, especially those from first and second class. We can read about their lives, their final moments, their family's grief. When a ship carrying African slaves sank in the Middle Passage, with similar or greater loss of life, it might not even be recorded. The enslaved people were cargo, not passengers. Their names were not documented. Their deaths were noted only as financial losses by ship owners. They vanished into the ocean utterly forgotten, unmourned except by those who loved them, who might themselves be enslaved or dead, unable to even learn of the tragedy. When a cholera epidemic swept through a wealthy neighborhood in the 19th century, newspapers reported it extensively. Doctors studied it. Public health measures were debated and implemented. The deaths mattered because the victims mattered to society, When the same epidemic struck a slum, it might receive a paragraph in the newspaper, if that. The poor were expected to die of disease. Their deaths prompted no particular action, inspired no reforms, left no lasting impact on collective consciousness. The plague we discussed earlier, the Black Death, killed rich and poor alike, but we remember the names of the wealthy and powerful who died while the millions of common people remain nameless statistics. The king's death is documented, the peasant's death is inferred from population decline. This is not merely historical reality. This is ongoing. When disasters strike today, we still see this pattern. Wealthy victims are named, photographed, memorialized. Their stories are told. Poor victims, especially those from marginalized communities, are often reduced to numbers, casualty counts without faces or names, or individual stories. The inequality of death, it seems, is one of humanity's most persistent features. But let us end this segment with a meditation on what transcends these inequalities. Whatever the circumstances, palatial bedroom or rough cottage, documented death or forgotten passing, certain experiences unite all the dying, the gradual or sudden awareness that life is ending, the mental processes of facing mortality, fear, acceptance, regret, peace, or some combination shifting moment to moment. The physical sensations of the body failing, systems shutting down. The strange interior journey of consciousness approaching its termination. A king on his deathbed feels the same chill as a beggar dying in the street. The texture of death, the weakness, the fading of awareness, the final moments. This is universal. Perhaps there is some comfort in this, or perhaps it is simply another tragedy that even in our final universal experience, we are divided by circumstances beyond our control. The wealthy die in comfort, surrounded by care and ceremony. The poor die in suffering, often alone or with minimal support. But both die. Both face the same ultimate mystery of what, if anything, comes after. Both leave behind the same type of absence, a consciousness that existed and now does not, a perspective that can never be recovered. We have walked now through many deaths, ordinary and extraordinary, documented and forgotten, dignified and desperate. We have seen how death is shaped by time and place and status, yet how it remains fundamentally the same experience beneath the surface variations. Let your mind rest now with these contrasts, not seeking to resolve them, they cannot be resolved, but simply acknowledging them. Death's inequality is real. Death's universality is equally real. Both truths exist simultaneously. The past is filled with these contradictions, these tensions between the particular and the universal. History gives us countless individual deaths and one universal dying. We can examine both, understand both, be moved by both. As we move toward conclusion, toward the gentle return from these dark corridors of the past, hold these thoughts lightly. They are heavy, but they need not crush us. They are sobering, but they need not paralyze us. Death happened. Death happens. Death will happen. This is simply true. How we face this truth, with fear or acceptance, with denial or acknowledgement, varies. But the truth itself remains constant. And so we come to the end of our journey through these shadows, these whispers of the past. We have walked together through plague-stricken villages and Senate chambers, through mountain passes and prison cells, through the deaths of emperors and the forgotten passings of countless unnamed souls. What have we witnessed? Tragedy, certainly, suffering, undeniably, but perhaps also something else, something about the persistent, fragile, precious nature of human existence itself. Every death we have explored tonight was, in its moment, the entire world ending for someone. When Caesar fell beneath those daggers, his world ceased. When the medieval mother died in childbirth, her children's world transformed irreversibly. When Ötzi collapsed in that mountain pass, whatever thoughts and memories and experiences filled his consciousness simply stopped, as completely as a candle flame extinguished. This happens constantly, has always happened, will continue to happen. Millions of times each day, somewhere on this planet, a consciousness experiences its final moments. The gradual or sudden realization that life is ending, the last thoughts whatever they may be, and then the profound silence of cessation. We cannot fully grasp this. Not really. We can know it intellectually, can recite statistics about mortality rates and death counts, but the actual reality of billions upon billions of individual deaths, each one as significant to the person experiencing it as our own death, will be to us. This is beyond human comprehension. So we do what humans have always done. We tell stories. We remember names when we can. We build monuments and write epitaphs, and create narratives that try to contain and make sense of the incomprehensible. The deaths we have explored tonight are remembered because they were dramatic, or mysterious, or historically significant, or because they illustrated larger truths about human experience. But behind each remembered death stand millions of forgotten ones, people who lived and loved and suffered and died without anyone recording their passing, without anyone preserving their memory beyond a generation or two. This might seem depressing. In some ways it is. The sheer scale of forgotten suffering, of lives lived and lost without trace, of all the joy and sorrow and complexity that simply evaporated into the past. Yes, there is something melancholy about this, but perhaps there is also something oddly comforting. You, lying in your comfortable bed tonight, in a world with antibiotics and anesthesia, and emergency services and all the machinery of modern medicine, you are safer than almost any human who has ever lived. The threats that haunted our ancestors, the casual violence of disease and accident and conflict, that made every day a negotiation with mortality, these have been dramatically reduced. A woman giving birth in a modern hospital has roughly a 1 in 5,000 chance of dying, tragic, when it happens, but incomparably better than the medieval odds we discussed, where perhaps 1 in 50 or 1 in 100 births proved fatal to the mother. A child born today in a developed nation has better than a 99% chance of reaching their 5th birthday. Compare this to the medieval village where 2 or 3 children of 5 might survive to adulthood. We live in the safest moment of human history, at least for those fortunate enough to be born in the right places with access to modern resources. This is worth acknowledging, worth feeling gratitude for, even as we recognize the continuing inequalities and sufferings that persist. The past we have visited tonight, that world of plague and executioner's acts, of death in childbirth and mysterious disappearances, of casual violence and casual disease. That world is gone. We live in its aftermath, beneficiaries of countless incremental improvements, of knowledge accumulated through millennia of trial and error, of social changes that have made life longer and safer and more predictable. This does not mean we will not die. Death remains universal, inevitable, the one appointment that cannot be postponed indefinitely. But most of us will die differently than most humans throughout history died. Later in life, with less suffering perhaps, with better understanding of what is happening to our bodies, with at least the possibility of dignity and comfort in our final days. This is no small thing. This in fact, one of humanity's great achievements, the conquest, partial but real, of the forces that once made life so brutally short and uncertain. So as you settle more deeply into rest, as your breathing slows and consciousness begins to drift toward sleep, let yourself feel the enormous distance between the past we have explored and the present moment you inhabit. You are not in a medieval village watching helplessly as plague sweeps through your community. You are not facing execution for your beliefs or your political positions. You are not lost in wilderness with an arrow wound in your shoulder, dying alone and unmourned. You are not a forgotten child prince locked in a tower, waiting for a death that may or may not come. You are here, now, safe and warm, with all the benefits of modernity surrounding you. The threats that made life so precarious for our ancestors have been pushed back, managed, in many cases eliminated entirely. This is worth holding in your awareness as you drift toward sleep, not with smug superiority over the past, but with quiet gratitude for the present. The people we have discussed tonight, Caesar and Huss and more, the medieval villagers and the plague victims, Ötzi and the princes and all the forgotten millions, they were no less human than you, no less intelligent, no less capable of joy or suffering, no less deserving of long and peaceful lives. They simply had the misfortune to live in times when death came early and often, when survival required equal measures of luck and strength, when the margin between life and death was perilously thin. You have the fortune to live in different times, not perfect times. Our era has its own tragedies, its own forms of suffering, its own inequalities and injustices. But in terms of sheer physical survival, in terms of the likelihood of living a long life and dying a relatively peaceful death, you are among the most privileged humans who have ever existed. Let this awareness settle into your body as you relax more deeply. Feel the softness of your bedding, the security of your shelter, the quiet confidence that tomorrow will almost certainly arrive and that you will still be alive to experience it. These are not things our ancestors could take for granted. The past we have explored tonight is real. It happened. Those deaths occurred. That suffering was genuine, but it is also past, finished. The people involved have been dead for decades or centuries or millennia. Whatever pain they experienced, it has long since ended. They are beyond suffering now, beyond fear, beyond all the troubles that afflicted them in life. And you are here, alive, present in this moment. This is remarkable. This is worth acknowledging. The contrast between the tragic deaths we have explored and the peaceful sleep you are moving toward. This contrast itself tells a story about progress, about humanity's gradual improvement of conditions, about how each generation has worked, sometimes consciously and sometimes not, to make life a little safer for those who follow. You benefit from this long history of incremental improvement. The doctors who learned to wash their hands between patients, the scientists who discovered antibiotics, the engineers who designed safer buildings and transportation, the social reformers who fought for better working conditions and public health measures, the countless SS people who across centuries contributed in small or large ways to making human life less precarious. Their work protects you tonight. Their achievements surround you. You sleep in safety that would have seemed miraculous to most humans throughout history. So let yourself sink deeper into rest, carrying with you not the horror of the deaths we have discussed, but the quiet recognition of how far we have come. The past was tragic. The present is safer. The future may be safer still. Death will come eventually for all of us. This remains true. But for most people reading these words, it will come later, and more gently than it came for most humans throughout history. This is something to hold lightly, gratefully, as consciousness begins to fade. The stories we have explored tonight, let them recede now into the background. They serve their purpose. They reminded us of mortality, of history, of the vast sweep of human experience, but they need not trouble your sleep. Instead, let yourself simply breathe, in and out, slow and steady. The rhythm of life continuing, moment by moment, breath by breath. You are alive. Right now, in this moment, you are alive. This is not guaranteed to continue forever, but it continues now, and now, and now. Each breath is a small miracle when you consider how many things had to go right for you to exist at all, in this time, in this place, with access to the safety and comfort that surrounds you. So breathe, and relax, and let the weight of all these heavy stories slide away, settling into the past where they belong. The dead are beyond our help or our worry. Their stories are finished. Their struggles are over. Whatever tragedies they experienced, those tragedies have concluded. What remains is only memory, only the echoes we carry forward, only the lessons we might learn, and the lesson perhaps is simple. Life is precious. Life is fragile. Life is temporary. This has always been true and will always be true. But for now, in this moment, you have life. You have this breath, this heartbeat, this gradual descent into rest and sleep. Let that be enough. Let the past remain past. Let the future worry about itself. For now, there is only this moment of comfortable safety, this gentle transition towards sleep. The night surrounds you, quiet and peaceful. The world continues its turning. Somewhere, dawn is breaking. Somewhere else, day is at its height. But here, now for you, it is time for rest. All the deaths we have discussed, all the tragedy and loss and suffering, these are part of the human story, yes, but they are not the whole story. There is also survival, resilience, the fact that despite everything, humanity continues. Despite plague and war and disaster and individual tragedy, life persists. You are part of that persistence, part of the long chain of survival that stretches back through generations and millennia. Every one of your ancestors survived long enough to reproduce, facing whatever challenges their times presented, overcoming enough to ensure the line continued, and here you are, the latest expression of that long survival, carrying forward the accumulated experience of countless generations. This is nothing you need to do anything about right now. This is simply something to hold gently as you drift deeper into rest. You are safe. You are comfortable. You are alive in the safest era of human history. The threats that haunted your ancestors have been pushed back. The deaths that came so easily to them will, with high probability, not come to you for many years yet. This is enough. This is more than enough. This is something to rest in, to feel gratitude for, to allow yourself to relax into completely. So let go now. Let consciousness begin to fade. Let thoughts become less coherent, more dreamlike. Let the stories we have explored dissolve into the general darkness of sleep. The past is past. The present is safe. The future will take care of itself. For now, there is only this: the quiet darkness, the comfortable bed, the slow rhythm of breathing, the gentle descent into sleep. Rest well. You are safe. You are here. You are alive. And that, for now, is everything. Good night.